Hi, welcome to the Newport, Bermuda 2024 recap of the Tide Goat Racing DESNA program. I'm Adam Van Voort, the skipper of the boat. This is Brian Brousseau, our XO and navigator, Samantha Van Voris, Isabella Blessington, Ed Sitfer, and Joshua Van Voris. And absent is my daughter Ariana, who is our 7th crew member rounding out. So without further ado, Newport, Bermuda Racing. I'll start with a little reading. Our story begins a little less than a year ago. It's Friday, June 21st in the Newport Harbor. The crew of DESNA has just boarded up for what will be their second Newport to Bermuda race. We've spent the better part of the winter preparing both the boat and the crew for more than 636 miles that lay ahead. So what is the Newport Bermuda race? It's one of the more prestigious races, considered, there's nothing official, but it's considered one of the 5 great ocean races, which puts it alongside the Fastnet, the Caribbean 600, and the Sydney to Hobart. These are some of the most challenging races out there and have written a lot of our stories about why we need to know about things like abandoned ship and rescue. The Newport Bermuda race is 635 miles, straight line.
That was me.
36.
Oh, I got it.
36 this year. That's a story. Often, and the race runs across, I'm going to do a little presto changeo here. Race was founded in 1906. It's over 100 years old. First race was 3 boats. First 3 started, 2 finished. 1906 race, Timberland was the winner with 126 hours and 9 minutes. For math that's more applicable to us, 5 days, 6 hours, and 9 minutes was their finish time. DESNA does it in a little over 4. I forgot the Transpac in the 5th grade race. The Bermuda race is held every 2 years. It's a biennial event on the even years. Its largest fleet was the Centennial in 06 with 265 boats. And the fastest time the boat race was finished was 2022, I believe, which was Argo, the Mod 70 Trimaran. They did it in 33 hours. So 33 hours versus 5 days, 9 minutes. Our race started with 162 boats, retiring 15 of those for 147 finishing, including the 2 that sunk on the course. It's a race not to be, can you make that thing go backwards to the last slide that was before? It's a race that's not to be trifled with. This right here is the second excerpts from the second paragraph of the Notice of Race. For anyone who's not a racer, Notice of Race is the bulletin that you post that gives you your basic directives of the race. It tells you what the race is going to be, kind of tells you where it's going to happen, how it is. First paragraph of this Notice of Race is a bunch of fluff about inspiration and people who have done it. And then it rolls into this. The full excerpt reads, the Newport Bermuda race is not for novices. 635-mile ocean race course across the Gulf Stream is often swept by gale force winds, large breaking waves, strong currents that can lead to damage, seasickness, hypothermia, and other issues. We've got all but hypothermia aboard DESNA. A large portion of this racing lies outside of the range of helicopter assistance. The Bermuda Race Organizing Committee very strongly encourages the designing, building, preparation, and seaworthy yachts sailed by self-sufficient crews, proficient in navigation, seamanship, and environmental stewardship. This race will reward them. This part here is more important than people realize. Bermuda has no rescue facilities. Once you are more than 300 miles off the United States coast, there is no rescue unless there happens to be a Navy ship passing or there happens to be a freighter. When you go racing in these races, your only rescue is your friends, the people you're racing with. That's a big misconception. People assume that you've got a helicopter from one side and a helicopter from another. Not so. There is not even a boat from Bermuda. if you can make it to a sea buoy, they will offer to tow you in. That is the extent of rescue that you can expect. So preparing for this race is, it's real. So how did we do it? 0 to Bermuda. Our crew, our project really began in the late fall. We had a 1981 production boat that most of you have seen, and a crew ranging from 17 to 70. Our timeline was based on 70. We looked and said, is 75 a good age to race the Newport Bermuda race? We don't know. But that's what we built a timeline for. I'm going to give a brief excerpt kind of how we went through this. If anyone has specific questions on details, we could do a whole presentation that could be a whole day on just how we built the boat and how we trained the crew. So it's going to be real kind of high level, quick step through, and at the end we'll have time to answer questions or if anyone wants to talk to us in further detail. Where did we start? And the answer to where we started was recruiting our crew. In the winter of 17, that 17-18 winter, we had done one boat race on this. We thought nighttime was the best time to learn how to race. So we went out and did the Mudheads overnight race that starts out at Groton Long Point and goes around Block Island. Starts at 6 p.m., finishes sometime Saturday morning. That was our initial how we're going to do this. Once we did that and thought this was a fun challenge, we just started recruiting and picking up crew. Started with about a dozen folks and narrowed it down to ultimately the 6 plus my daughter who's not here that you see here today. That doesn't mean that wasn't important. When you're building a program like this, you're going to have shore support, you're going to have people who advise you, you're going to have a lot more than just the people who are on the boat during the race. So 2017, 2018, we start to actually put the boat together. We start to put some fresh sails on and get out on the water to do some sailing. The other big thing is connections. Find people, talk to them. Toujours was a Tartan 37 that did the 2016 Bermuda race. I reached out to that captain shortly after that because I saw it, because I was stalking the race, and just started talking to him. Said, I have a Tartan 37 and I'd like to race it. What do you think? And Bermuda wasn't even really right on the radar yet. They were pretty helpful for us for getting our program put together. In 18, we're really doing local races, and what we're learning above all else is how much we don't know and how much we really need to learn. We're finding out that proverbial you don't know what you don't know. We're starting to find out everything we don't know and the blanks we need to fill in. Now we're getting into starting to really build the boat. Our program was to be working on the boat all winter. Some of you who passed through here in the winter saw us out in the snow drilling through holes and stuff. So we figured out how to work on the boat. We figured out how to work with epoxies in the cold. Did all our boat building during the winter so we could spend the summers building the crew through a building block approach. Basically, we did one set of things to the boat, raced it for the summer, see how that works, what we need to fill it in, and we just worked with a really patient mindset towards building out everything we needed one at a time so we wouldn't be going back and redoing things over. It's an approach I would highly recommend. It worked out really well for us. Summer 18, we get things. Summer of 19 sees our first multi-day race, which was the race around Long Island. Starts at the Statue of Liberty and finishes up this side of Long Island just a little bit before the East River. Really great race for learning how to do stuff at night. They run a great race, and it's a more mellow race. It's a sort of cruisery people that race once in a while. It's a great introduction. In that race, some of the really big things we learned. In the harbor, we spent a bunch of time, spent almost a whole day sailing around, figuring stuff out. That got us under the Verrazano Bridge, second boat out, right behind the Naval Academy. What you do, what you observe, what you research, it really matters. It's going to make a difference. Ocean multi-day racing, you make up time at night. People are tired, people are worn out, people aren't used to working swinging, rolling schedules. that's when you can get them. You can sneak up on them. If you can keep your crew moving and stay motivated, nighttime is a great time to make up things you've lost during the day, especially if you have a boat that doesn't go to windward. We also learned don't go too far on the wheel because the rudder becomes a brake. 19 to 20, we repowered the boat. We basically gutted everything from about the companionway aft and started from scratch. Lots of people, Drew included, were instrumental in this process. We took what was offered to us and tore it completely apart and made it our way. And that's worked out very well for us. Summer of 2020, by some accounts, it was a loss for a lot of people. It worked out really well for us. Luckily, our crew had no distractions because they couldn't go anywhere. So we were able to get everybody out. The Mudheads did get racing going. So we were able to race on Wednesday nights, and we were able to learn an awful lot about boat handling and boat on boat. A lot we didn't know before. That was a really productive time for us. Also in the how do you take a few people who are coastal cruisers, Brian and I had tripped over my crewmate Ed, who had done some offshore. And so we did some offshore deliveries. That was our first one, in this case down to Savannah, going out and around Diamond Shoals. It's really important to get your guys out on the water. We get into the rescue later. That crew didn't have much experience, and it really showed. It got them where they ended up.
When he says experience, he means experience with each other and time with each other.
Yeah,
Individually, a lot of them did have a lot of experience.
So it's important to get on the water. It's important to know who you're with. So we get through 2020, got a new engine, a lot of new electrical. We're about halfway on our electrical overhaul. We're getting much better at maneuvers, getting our reps. Our crew is getting used to working together. And that brings us into 2021, which was really our first, what we consider our real ocean race. So now we're in the winter. You're really thinking about the things on the boat that are really important at this point. You're going to go offshore where you're on your own. You need good handholds. Sounds like a silly thing, but you need to be able to move around a boat when it's 30 degrees the wrong way. And it stays that way for days at a time. So you need to think about where your handhold's going to go. How are you going to be able to do that? If you get water in your boat, how are you going to get water out? You probably need a few different ways. The guys this year in this year's race can talk about that extensively. Our nav station was extra. We didn't need to do that, but it was a nice finish. Addressing things like the centerboard. In our boat, we have a centerboard with a standpipe. That's a water ingress point that's very difficult to get to. These are all the things you want to be looking at for offshore, because safety at sea will talk extensively about all these things you can do and all these problems and all these solutions when you're out there, and how you're going to solve your problems when your problems happen when you're out there. And we had 3 boats this year in the Newport, Bermuda that proved that, in fact, you can't solve your problems when you're out there. When you're in really confused seas, in 20 to 30 knot winds, in seas running, what would you guess? What would you put a number on? So you come up with top peak seas. What do you think the biggest seas you saw were?
15, 20?
So I'm going to say firmly 20-foot seas, because we're dropping into troughs of waves. I'm already standing 3 feet above the water when I'm standing at my helm, and we're dropping into troughs of waves, and it is more than my body height above me. Maybe not quite 20s, but they were big and they were steep. The crew of the Alliance, the boat that sunk in the Gulf Stream on the way to Bermuda, in the worst of it at night, had an outstanding crew. And I would argue that if they couldn't solve their problem, there weren't a lot of other superstars that are going to. The answer to solving your problems is don't have them. Address, it sounds silly, but it's the truth. Address these issues. address your boat's weaknesses ahead of time. It's really important, and you'd be surprised how many people don't do it. The towboat guys are way less surprised. So summer 2021, we do the Annapolis-Newport race, and we pulled off second place. Desna's not a real great upwind boat, and she's not a real great light wind boat because she's so heavy. So our fight down the bay, so Annapolis-Newport race starts up in the Chesapeake Bay in Annapolis. It's about a day and a half, 2 days? Day and a half to sail down the Chesapeake, and then you get out into the open water. That was a real struggle for us. We learned a lot about that. We learned a lot about staying out of the middle. Don't be in the middle of Long Island Sound at sunup. Don't be in the middle of Chesapeake Bay at sunup. There's no wind. In that race, once we get out into the open water, we pop our spinnaker. That's where Desna does her best. Spend 2 days under spinnaker and finish up at Castle Hill in Newport. We also came into the fall. We're back into training and planning and working with other people and networking. We actually went out with the other Tartan 37 to Jors in Newport, and we spent a whole day doing boat-on-boat tuning, putting the boats side by side and figuring out how we could make our boats go faster. And our whole goal was to make sure that in the 2022 Newport Bermuda, our 2 boats were first and second, and we were going to fight it out and figure out who that was. We'll get to that. So things we learned that summer was we were sailing the boat pretty well at that point, but we learned don't try and get up on the wind. Keep the boat going fast. Fast is always better, especially in a distance race. We also learned that our boat is front-wheel drive. The main doesn't do a lot for us. Don't make your head sails small first. Make the main smaller. So winter of 2021, we were on program, and that left us in a position to really just spend the winter doing odds and ends. The boat was about ready for the Bermuda race. Everything we had to have for inspections was done. All of our equipment was done, and it was all in place. We were able to get a lot of odds and ends, nice to-dos done. This is a picture here. We completely redid the centerboard, refaired it, and then did some, what's the bearing made out of?
Rulon, I think.
Rulon.
It's a composite,
So
slippery plastic.
we're trying to figure out a way to make our centerboard a little more efficient. 10th of a knot matters over 4 days. What we learned, and that brought us to the 2022 Newport Bermuda, which was our first Bermuda race. We got underway in that one in really sporty conditions. It was gusting up to 30 out in Newport for the start. Fully half of the crew was seasick by the time we crossed the starting line, just from going back and forth in the starting area. It was pretty big choppy seas, short choppy nasty seas in the starting area. We got going, we got out of Newport, and promptly the thunderstorms blew through and sucked all the wind away. So then we all got to bob for a little while. I don't think it was actually as long as it felt. Once the wind filled in and we got going, we kept it. We took what we had learned about keeping it going fast, and we just took a point of sail that would get us to the Gulf Stream as fast as possible. Once we got going, there was some point where I believe we were in the stream, and we realized we were leading our division. And that was, all of our pieces were coming together. We were doing really well. It was still blowing hard. Some of the most fun racing I've done in my life at night with a nice beam reach, just coasting over these waves. It was a pretty amazing event. And the sun comes up and we're still going fast and we're thinking we're killing, we're there. We get to the right angle for the spinnaker, we pop the spinnaker, we're going, and we're thinking off soundings, right? Off soundings, you always put the spinnaker up. Because, I mean, if you rip it, there's always the other spinnaker, or there's always next race. Unfortunately, our class in this race is only allowed to carry one spinnaker. Sometime in the middle of the day, I'm in my bunk, and all of a sudden, I'm laying on my lee cloth, looking down at the port lights on the port side of the boat, and there's nothing but water. The boat had broached. We jammed the sheet, and the spinnaker just shredded. And from that, our fight for first and second turned into our buddies made it to first. but we fell back and finally finished in fourth. Number one thing we took away from that race, it's maybe you just have to learn it the hard way, but it is an endurance event, and you got to finish the race. So you can't push the boat, you can't push the equipment quite as hard. You can still push the crew. They're made of rubber. But you can't push the boat and the equipment quite as hard as you can in an off-soundings race or a day race. You've got to be a little bit more mindful of that.
You weren't alone in that spinnaker disaster.
No.
A lot of spinnakers blew out.
No, they, yeah.
Don't beat yourself up.
It's not, it's just, it's one of those, we are for all intents and purposes and still consider ourselves a very novice ocean crew.
And the fact that we were in first place leading our class for up until the last day, even though we blew our spinnaker out on day 2, we were really happy with that result. Unfortunately, when the wind died down, the spinnaker was the weapon of choice, and we didn't have it anymore. And everybody just passed us right at the end. Such as racing.
Yeah, and that's the fun and the challenge of these events. We still made it to fourth. We still got on the stage.
And that was 4,000 how many points? 100 or 200, did you say?
No. I'm going to explain a little more how Newport Bermuda does it.
Okay.
Our group would have been our division, so divisions and then classes. Our division would have been 20 to 30-ish boats, and our class would have been, I want to say a dozen was our class. Does that sound right, Chris? I think we were in the same division, same class.
That's still respectable.
But
Sounds like.
yeah, I mean, all things being equal, it was better than I expected once the sail was torn. 23, we kind of took the season off. We did the Marblehead Halifax race. The biggest thing I can say about that is don't. It's such a terrible race. Now, to be fair, they put together, race committee does a great job. I was really skeptical about having to deal with logistics in Marblehead and everything in there. They did a great job with that, us getting there and getting going, and all that was good. However, that's normally a nice downwind race. We found the one year to do the Marblehead Halifax race that it was a 100% upwind race. The good news was, because of weather systems, the wind turned around, so we had upwind to come home as well. So we got really, really good at being close-hauled and walking around the boat with the boat at 30 degrees a heat.
No boats in our class actually finished the race that year.
It was foggy except for the last day. Also.
Yeah.
Just pure.
The Marblehead Halifax race is a tough race, I think. I know Mama Tucker's done it. It's a tough race. It's cold, it's foggy. Typically it's a downwinder, which makes it nice, particularly for boats like us, but it is a tough race to do. That was really all we did there. We made some minor modifications, some tweakings, and that was pretty much, that's what built us up to what we expected to be our main event. Our program was designed and built to take us from 5 years to our first Newport Bermuda race, and then a second Newport Bermuda race. These races are an all-in effort especially for the navigator and the skipper, but even for the crew. It's a lot of commitment. At least if you're on my crew, it's a big commitment. We're putting a lot into it. We expect the crew to as well. So we knew that we weren't going to just do this indefinitely. And 2024 was our planned end of program. But we came into that race feeling very prepared. We were coming off of what we knew. We knew that we had a really good chance of beating Toujours. So they got first. We knew that it was there. It was ours for the taking. So we came into this race really ready to go. And that's that's what I was conveying or trying to convey at the beginning with my opening reading. That we're boarding up, we're ready to go. The energy is really intense. My father dropped us off for one of the back and forths when we were going back and forth getting ready for this race, and he just came back. He said, he was part of the original dozen of maybe. original dozen crew, and he opted that no, this really wasn't for him, but he came back. He said, I'm so jealous and so disappointed. He said, the atmosphere here is just electric. I can't believe what it's like in this lead up to this race. So that's where we are. We're there. We're ready. We're ready to go out and win 2024. So how do we prepare? What does one do to prepare to go on an individual race, or in this case, the Newport Bermuda race individually? We had really gotten down. We have a pretty finite preparation plan at this point. All of our crew is required to do safety at sea, so everybody goes through the process. That said, it is not a silver bullet. Safety at Sea is a program that's devised by a whole lot of people who sit around and talk about what if, but a lot of it's really not tested. It's up to you as the sailors of the boats to go out there and actually apply it, to put it on your boat and see, is it going to work or isn't it? Man overboard is one of the classic things. They tell you, oh yeah, you'll just put a block and tackle on your boom, and that's how you're gonna hoist man overboards that way. After some extensive discussion, almost nobody does it that way. Almost everybody comes up with other solutions. On Desna, for us, it's a straight up halyard. We simply grab whatever line the crew members been brought back to the boat with, put a 8 on a bite on that line, snap a halyard on it, and we've got plenty of force. We've got enough force to put 1,000 pounds on a sail. We can easily lift a couple 100-pound person. And we've worked it through, we've practiced it, people in the water, and we know how that system's going to work. But it's really important that all of this practice and all this stuff that you're doing to get ready, you're actually taking it out and using it. Just doing it in a ground school doesn't get you there. So we do that. Brian and I typically start our first race. We started looking at the Gulf Stream in February and started mapping it and cataloging all the movements, cataloging where the warm cores are, where the cold cores are, what the meander's doing. For the second race, we felt a little more confident that we had an handle on it, so we started in March. But if you look at it from a planning, we basically start our meteorological planning in March for the June race. Early season, end of March, early April, we start some ground schools. We start bringing the crew together, going through all of the things that they've got to know, running back through. We have what we call a quick reference handbook that has everything from tank volumes and quick stuff you might want to know on a daily basis to emergency checklists. We start going through those checklists. We make sure everyone's qualified in AIS communications. We remind everyone, including me, how to use the sat phone, sat communications, because that's a little hokey. All those things we start in our ground school. And then for our actual race, our actual on water, looking at a lot of the special forces stuff, and I fly with a lot of naval aviators and talking to them a lot, we basically digested it down into what the Navy calls a pre-deployment workup. Or what the aviators and I don't know what everybody in the Navy does, but certainly the aviators and the special forces guys, the Navy special warfare guys, do a pre-deployment workup where they're not just honing their number one skill, in our case, racing the boat, but they just have a whole checklist of things you're going to check off in. We're going to check proficiency in all these things. You know, for the military, it's rifles. For the aviators, it's weapon systems on the aircraft. All this stuff. So we start going through. The race has checklists involved. You need to do this training, this training, this training, this training. So we go out and go through those. When we do man overboard training, every crew member must drive a successful man overboard recovery. So we're throwing our little man overboard buoy in the water. Every crew member drives that and demonstrates being able to get back efficiently and quickly under sail. We have storm sails up. We put them up, put them down. Everyone needs to know how to work the storm sails. Steering without a rudder. We go out and practice that. Every crew member participates. Steering without the rudder is a group activity, so it's no one person qualifying by themselves on that. We also take advantage of as much local racing as we can. We do the Wednesday nights. It's great for maneuvers. It's great for cycles. Just gets people used to being in each other's way and tripping over each other. we have the Weatherall race is a longer race that goes from Saybrook out around Vineyard and back. And then a couple of soundings events. And from there, we are off to Newport. And we're back at the beginning of the story. Boarding up on our mooring, getting ready to go the morning of. So for the 2024 race, the morning of the race, we were broken into divisions and then classes within divisions. So for the race, there were 162 boats total. The divisions are the St. David's Light, which is the famous, that's the division everyone sees the most of. That's your typical offshore sled type boats, J121s and J120s, the Cal 40s. These are the faster but Corinthian type, civilian type, if you will, boats. Gibbs Hill, Gibbs Lighthouse is basically the pro group. Anybody who wants can sign up for it, but you're going to be racing against the best sailors in the world if you do that. Still on some kind of normal-ish boats, some production boats, but mostly a lot of really fancy custom stuff. And then you've got multi-hull and super yacht. That's pretty self-explanatory. Super yacht would be Comanche. The boats that are the 100-footers, typically they call them. And then the multi-hull, those are the multi-hulls. So they go out and win everything because you just can't be faster than a boat that can beat the wind. Double-handers, and then we are Finisterre division. Finisterre formerly was the cruising division, and that's where we run. For us, we had that was 11. 30. Our class was 30 at the start. Or our division was 30 at the start, and our class was, I believe, 12 or 14. 12. We lost one boat. So, with this in mind, this is where we're starting our race. 162 boats in the starting area. 15 of those would not finish the race, including the 2 that sunk.
Is this the right slide?
This is where we go next. This is where we'll lead into. I moved around on the other slide, the other 2 slides. So with that, we're dropping the mooring. We're getting ready to go. This is our weather forecast. So our navigator will talk a little bit about what we expected as we were leaving the mooring, how we expected the conditions to be.
So we had remnants of Tropical Storm Alberto over central Mexico. Not quite sure what that's going to be doing. There was an area off the southeast coast of Florida area, which had the potential of becoming a named storm. But it didn't look like either of these were going to influence the race course at the time. We had the normal summer Bermuda high, 200 miles northeast of Bermuda. And we had a cold front moving into New England. And the cold front was forecasted to produce thunderstorms, which actually was the same thing that happened in 2022, or very similar. And the first warning for the race was at 2 o'clock, and the winds were out of the north at 7. Our start time was at 3:20, and we were forecast to have southwest winds at 6. So with the new starting area up inside Narragansett Bay, that means the southwest breeze were going to be tacking up wind. We also had a incoming tide, so the thunderstorms to the north eating up the wind, and southwest breeze and a building flood, it was going to be a challenge getting out of the bay. We've been studying the Gulf Stream for the last 3 or 4 months. This was a model from June 21st. And what you're looking at here is altimetry, the height of the ocean. Satellites go overhead and measure the height of the water. And areas that are warm are actually higher in elevation than the areas of cold water. And the warmer areas rotate clockwise and the cold areas rotate counterclockwise. So we're looking at this, we're looking at sea surface temperature charts. The problem with sea surface temperature is the satellites can't see through the clouds. And it's amazing how many cloudy days there are leading up to the race. And a lot of it has to do with the Gulf Stream generates its own weather. So the clouds obscure where the Gulf Stream is on the satellite imagery. The dark line there, that's the rum line that we're going to be following. And then the bulk of the Gulf Stream is coming up this way, meandering this way here. So we're going to try and end up getting into this fast-moving water that's heading south. Take over the start.
So, to start this year, Newport, Bermuda decided to go Instagram. And it traditionally has always been off of Castle Hill, which is a ways out. Lots of open water, lots of room. They pulled it back to Fort Adams, sort of mirroring what the Volvo Ocean Race used to do. So our starting line was in tight. A lot of complaints about that in the beginning. We didn't find any issues. We thought it was a perfectly good start, comfort-wise. Problem with it was, it had us way down deep in the harbor with a building tied against us and dying winds. So just about the time our warning hit, which was right around, I think we had about a 3 o'clock start was where ours was. First warning goes off. We have a 10-minute warning in this particular sequence. The wind dies. We were at the wrong end of the starting line. People always talk about in an offshore race, oh, the start doesn't matter in an offshore race. Just get across the line and do it clean and don't hit anybody. That's all that matters. The start mattered for us, huge. Toujours, which is the boat we were really racing, because we were essentially one design with them, was at the opposite end of the line, down close to the shore with Fort Adams, which would be eastern side? So eastern side against that wall that takes you out.
Which we knew we wanted to be there.
Which we had every intention of being there, because we're electronic intensive. We were trying to get the end of the starting line, and we thought we had plenty of time to hit that end of the line with our computer, put a computer mark on it, so we had it identified and get to where we wanted to get. But, as earlier stated, the wind died. There we were, stuck. So we ambled along. I think we did cross the line right at the start. I think we were right at this, had a nice, from the idea of crossing the line at full power at the start, such as full power was in 5 knots less or 5 knots or less of breeze. We did cross, but we were in the middle of the channel, in the worst of the tide. Meanwhile, the boats that had gotten down there were able to slide up along the shore with a little less current against, and the breeze holding they had a little bit better breeze, maybe some micro shore breeze. They were able to slide out, and that just got worse for about the next 4 to 5 hours. And you can see our course here. This is our course. And we finally, we wanted to be able to do was come to here and kind of do this. And we ended up having to just come all the way to here because it's the only way we could actually make the boat go. And so we wallowed around, and we were finally able to get it back around and come out to here. And this is where at about 8 p.m., the wind finally fills in. Between probably here and 8 p.m., the wind came from every single direction. If we had done the correct sail changes, we would have flown every single sail we had on the boat, except for the storm sails, to get from here to here. And then about 8 o'clock, the wind finally fills in, builds up to a nice 12 knots. That's really nice wind for us.
Actually, the wind filled in right here.
Oh, we meandered all the way down to here.
This was all various headings as the wind was shifting around. And that right there is where the wind picked up.
So that's 8 p.m.
Yep.
All right. Okay, and that's 2048 there. And that's when the race finally got going for us. But in that period of time, Toujours, just because of their placement at the start, was able to be that much further out. So don't ever let you tell anyone the start doesn't matter in offshore race. The start always matters. That said, we fully anticipated a Wednesday night start with Toujours. We just were in the wrong place at the wrong time. Day 2 sees things building. And in our forecast, what did we expect in our forecast?
Basically wind picking up out of the southwest throughout the next couple of days. And as we got closer to the center of the Bermuda High, for the wind to die off for our approach to Bermuda, which is a pretty typical Bermuda race.
And really, as far as wind speeds went, we pretty much got exactly what we expected. I think even the wind filling in around 8 o'clock was about when we expected, give or take an hour or so, expected it to happen. So everything now is kind of going according to plan. We're looking at the tracker, trying to figure out where Tejors is and what can we do to fix this. And we're just watching things continually build. What we didn't expect was the Gulf Stream. In our last race, we hit the Gulf Stream and it was like a magic carpet. Everything was really lumpy and a little bit chaotic leading up to the Gulf Stream. And as soon as we got into the stream, it smoothed out, magically smooth, and the boat was just flying. We were waiting and hoping for that. But as the winds built and we kept making progress towards the Gulf Stream, it was not to be. We start feeling the first effects of the Gulf Stream in the middle of the night or the early morning, depending on your perspective. So 0300 as we're starting to get into the stream, and we're like, all right, maybe it'll smooth out. I don't think we said it should, but I think we were saying maybe. We're hoping. It didn't. The Gulf Stream, as I think most people who follow the race at all, was one of the more chaotic years. The seas were very steep and coming from every direction. So as we got into this, it literally just kept getting worse.
So the image that you have there, that's a computer model of the Gulf Stream. It's not accurate at all, but it's kind of similar. So we have this meander coming south here. We've got a southwest wind, a little bit of current against wind, which is why this was just a very disturbed area of water. And at this point, we're up to 17 knots of wind at 4 a.m., and it's just going to continue to build.
We've changed down to, we're down to our smallest regular head sail at this point. And we're just moving back and forth between a double reefed and a single reefed main. Which a double reefed main on Desna is something akin to a handkerchief torn in half. There's not a lot of sail up there when we're doing that. Oddly, what was funny to me that I didn't expect, 32 was a pretty average wind speed in our first Bermuda race, so those numbers didn't bother me at all. 32 knots with the close reaching that we were doing was a much more abusive situation than it had been in the former race on a nice beam reach. So even though the winds weren't as bad as they were, the crew and the boat were really starting to take a beating.
So Alliance, I think their boat sunk at 5 or 6 in the morning on Sunday. We crossed their position at about 3 o'clock that day, and we picked up their EPIRB right here as we went by. When it went off, we weren't expecting to see a SARP. We didn't know what it was. We didn't know Alliance had issues yet at that point. And we called it into a boat that was behind us, saying, hey, we were already down current and downwind of it, and it was going to be a big challenge to get back to that SARP. And we looked, and we saw there was another boat looked like they were going to intercept. So I called them on the radio, and they hadn't picked up the EPIRB yet, but they were going to keep an eye on it. And they ended up picking up the EPIRB probably another half hour later. They came close to it, and they told us that they were going to go intercept it. Turns out it was Alliance's EPIRB. Everybody had been saved at that point, but we didn't know that at the time.
So Sunday, day 3, it's now starting to get exciting. The good part about upwind sailing is there's no real sail trimming to do. We've got the sails set. We're racing the boat as close to them as we can. The waves are pretty square, so we're trying to kind of go up them and slide down them. Every now and again you miss, and it pretty much sounds like someone dropped the boat on a piece of concrete. And the entire boat at this point is just creaking. There's just water coming from everywhere. Every I don't think the port lights didn't leak, but every other part of the boat was leaking. The mast collar, the hatches, places that I have no idea where water was coming from.
We had removed the derades, and the water was so deep over the cabin top, the water was flowing up the derade drains, filling the boxes, and pouring down the derade vents. We were picking squid off the cabin top that was stuck in the rutting rigging.
I think, Joshua, where did you find one? In the mainsail?
Yeah, in the reef folds in the main.
Squid up in the main, up there. Ariana coined it best. We were down to the point where we were riding a mechanical bull inside a washing machine. We had three people on deck at a time, and believe it or not, on deck was the more comfortable place to be. The cabin was just a misery. You were laying down at least, but it was just constant saltwater spray. You weren't dry. You weren't particularly cold because at least it was a warm saltwater spray. But it wasn't pleasant.
We were pretty much sleeping in our foul weather gear.
Yeah, you just laid down. You'd have three in the cockpit. We had one person driving, one person on the leeward bench just laying there, and the best place you could possibly be was human on the floor. So we had one person would lay on the floor, and we rotate through. And we just kept that going for basically 2 days. But we were doing well. I mean, we were polar, so we've got posted, actually it's back one. We were seeing the best performance out of the boat, or out of the crew, that we had ever seen. Brian runs a whole tracking suite that keeps track of everything the boat does, all of our performance, and it calculates polars, which a polar is a theoretical thing of what the boat ought to be able to do, given conditions. And ours are pretty refined. They're directly reflective of the boat. It's all the input from our instruments and everything feeding them.
So after each race, I analyze the data, come up with, well, what did we actually do? And then we modify our polars. There's a software suite that helps us do that called Expedition. So the polar data in the computer is really indicative of past performance. And we're currently on day 2, averaged 107% of our polar data. With an average boat speed for the day of 6.8 knots.
Which for Desna is really fast. So while riding a mechanical bull in a washing machine, our crew is giving us about the best performance we've ever had.
So day 3 was a little bit rougher. We couldn't quite get the polar performance. Just with the rough seas was slowing us down. But we're pushing the boat really hard.
Because we had built it all out, because we had looked at everything from our center board conduits to our chain plates, to everything we had, it was certainly the most nervous I've ever been. But we really had total faith. We had faith our rig was going to stay up. We had faith our boat was going to stay together. That's a really important thing when you're going to go to these places. And that brings us into Monday, still going. We're the same. And Tuesday morning is the beginning of all of the drama that everyone really came to hear about. So after 2 solid days of being in the stream, and it's funny when we describe this because we're describing it as sunrise, it's this warm, it's this beautiful day, like we're laying there for the first time, we feel like we're drying out a little bit. And I don't remember those 2 days in the middle. I think it was darkness the entire time. I don't think we ever stopped racing at night. But now it is a beautiful day. Brian, Samantha, and I are on watch together. We had a rotating watch system, so we're changing one person out every hour, so everybody gets to sail together, kind of. Which the goal of that is to keep fresh people on deck. So we're, instead of one tired crew getting replaced by one slightly less tired crew member, one fresh person is coming up and rotating through, and it keeps a really nice synergy going. And at that point, it's the 3 of us. And at 7:25, the radio goes off. It starts making crazy noises, which is all I'm thinking at that point is, make that stop. Why are we listening to that? We're in the middle of the ocean. There's nobody here. What was the pertinence of that?
So we got a all ships call. I've never received an all ships call. If you were here earlier, in my last presentation, I talked about all these DSC features. Nobody knows about these things. And here we are, we're getting one. And I actually knew what it was. And the beauty of this is everything was logged in the radio, all automatically. We had their MMSI number. From the start, I had logged everybody in our class's MMSI number from AIS. So I knew that I knew the vessel that this came from. Shortly thereafter, we get a pan-pan call coming across channel 16. And it sounded like we were listening to a broadcast from the BBC. Beautiful, clear, crystal clear voice, British accent, no sense of urgency in the tone of the voice. And I mean, exactly like the book says, pan, 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 this is Gunga Din, Gunga Din, Din. Only said the GPS position once, unlike everything else he said 3 times. And it's a beautiful morning. It's actually the nicest day that we've had in the last 3 or 4. And he also said it's 11 o'clock. And we're looking at our watch like it's 7:25 in the morning. Like, this hasn't happened yet. This isn't real. Like, and of course we're all tired too. So.
And that was it. It really did feel like a Twilight Zone moment where we're looking at I'm literally looking at my watch. I have a Garmin watch I wear on the boat, and I'm literally looking at it. I'm like, what? This, and that, the funny thing, Brian illustrated, it sounded like BBC. That's the literal verbiage they use in Safety at Sea, is you want to sound like a proverbial BBC broadcaster when you make these calls on the radio so people will understand you. So we're like, what is this? Is this a joke? However,
so our radio has the ability to record and play back. So we played it back 3 or 4 times. We got a pencil out and finally got the GPS position written down on the cockpit wall and went down below and started plotting it out in the chart. And tried calling them back on the radio. They're not answering. But we heard them crystal clear on the radio. Now they're not responding. The time doesn't add up. It's beautiful out. Like, none of this is adding up. So, and I would have told you that this is 5 or 10 minutes that transpired, but because of the logging features, we know that we called on the sat phone out to race control at 7:50. So it took us from 7:25 to 7:50 to figure out that this was actually a real thing going on, and that we were actually the closest boat, and that there actually may be a problem. Like I said, that felt like 5 minutes. We called race control. They were aware of the situation. They confirmed that we were the closest boat. They suggested that we respond to it.
They kind of ordered us.
At 7:51, we decided we were going to suspend racing. We started the engine and made the turn. So here we are at that point. This is the reported position of Gunga Din at the time. We're here, and we just made a left turn.
At this point, what we know is race control had nothing more to offer us except they were under the understanding that Gunga Din was indeed in distress, and we were unable to communicate with Gunga Din. We did continue to try and contact them. What they said in the pan is we're taking on water. As Brian said, the voice was very calm, but at this point, that's right. That was it. Paul does sound like David Attenborough. We don't know really anything except for that the 2 worst things at sea is you're taking on water or you're on fire. So at least they weren't on fire. But we're 80 miles, at this point we're 80 miles east of Bermuda. Your next stop is Africa, maybe, from here? I think, maybe the Canaries?
Bermuda's right here on the chart. So that's about 80 miles.
We know we're out there by ourselves. We don't see anybody else on AAS. And now we're in a position of what's next? We get underway, we get steaming. We're motor sailing. It's downwind. We probably have 20 knots-ish of breeze. So it's not a terrible way to be doing it. And after the ride we'd had for the last few days, it certainly felt good to be going smooth and fast and relaxed. But we didn't have a lot to do. And we realized at that point that we had prepared to fix our boat. We had prepared to leave our boat. But we had never prepared to solve someone else having to leave their boat. Nowhere in our thought process was that we would be rescuers. And only in our planning was the thought that we might be rescued. We never intended to do that for clear and obvious reasons. So now we had about 3 hours to try and figure out what are we doing, and the only thing we know is it's a boat taking on water. Joshua brought up at some point in there, he's like, why are they taking on water? Are we going to hit something if we get near them? Are we going to hit something between here and there? Is there a container in the water? What happened? So at this point, we don't have much else to work with. We checked our water, we checked our fuel, kind of tried to figure out a pregame, but we really didn't have one.
So after about 45 minutes from when we made the left-hand turn, we started picking up Gungadin on AIS. They were moving about 2 knots to the southeast away from us. And if you look at our track, you can kind of see we made the left turn and we're heading towards Gungadin, but this is actually where we made contact with them. And then about 2.5 hours into our diversion, we had actually made voice contact with them. They were on handheld at that point.
So now we've got them on the radio, and we asked them, I think we asked them very specifically, why are you taking on water, and is there a hazard we need to be aware of? Is there something we're going to hit, or something we could hit? Probably unlikely at that point. They've moved, we've moved, nothing's where it was whenever their problem started. And at this point, they advised us that they had no engine, and they were cutting away the interior to try and find the source of their flooding. I think it was probably another 30 minutes from them we actually got alongside being a rough, right in the neighborhood visual. We arrive on scene, and we arrive on station and get them back on the radio, and what do they say?
So we're there, we're like, okay, we're here. What can we do for you? And their response was, well, what are you offering? And I said, stand by.
We didn't have ice cream. We had beer, but there were 7 of us already. We weren't giving them our beer.
So Adam and I talked it over, and like, well, what are we going to tell these guys we're offering? And what we came to the conclusion is, I called them back and says, well, we're willing to stay here as long as you need us to, while you work through your problems. We're happy to talk through and offer advice or our thoughts, or just sometimes having somebody to talk through when you're tired makes you think of things you hadn't thought of. We offered, like, we've got a boat full of tools and supplies and fuel filters that may or may not fit. We can probably come up with a way to throw a heaving line in a bag and transfer anything that they need that we have that we could offer. We said we were willing to take you on board, but we were not going to come alongside. And that if you wish to come aboard, you're either going to have to get in the water or get in your life raft.
So keep in mind, as we're approaching, once we start to see the boat for real, and this is one of those big things running through your head, we're expecting to see a boat sitting with water washing over the gunnels. What we see is a boat sitting very high in the water, really not looking too terrible for the wear at first glance. Turned out the rig was dead slack. I'm not sure when we noticed that exactly, but things...
We were leaving it as
from...
we wanted the things sway.
Okay. From where we were sitting, nothing looked really urgent at this point.
So we get done, we give them a list of things that we're willing to do, and we get silence as they're obviously working through what they want to do. And very shortly thereafter, we see the life raft go over the side. That was the indication they were going to get in the life raft and get on board. They didn't talk to us about that was the plan, but we were pretty confident in what they were thinking at that point. Very short amount of time.
So, life raft goes in the water. We have very minimal communication on the radio. And the transfer starts. And this is what it looks like with just a little editing to make some of our crew members look better. If it makes you feel better, Ed, it took Kaylee 3 tries to get the throwback.
I was going to say, it makes you feel any better.
So one thing this was after, I think, our third attempt to get to them. The first time they had the cover on the life raft and the doors facing that way. So we had them cut, maybe it was only a second attempt. I guess we only did it 2. We had them cut the canopy away, which made a huge difference.
So here, what's not obvious in this picture, what they've elected to do without discussion, we'll talk about this in lessons learned in the wrap-up, but what they decided to do without discussion is they were going to transfer half of the crew and half of the crew. So the life raft is still attached to Gunga Din. So you've got a rope, a rubber shock absorber thing,
with drogues and ballast bags underneath it.
and drogues and ballast bags in it. I mean people. And another rope coming to Desna. I guess we don't have sound. What sound? Maybe there's no sound to hear.
So now, is Gunga Din moving now too?
Everybody's just. Well, at this point I'm backing down on the life raft because we can't. What's that? We came alongside the life raft
Okay.
and threw them our throw bag. So the line that you've got there is our throw bag line.
And there's currently 3 people. I think there's 3. There's 3 or 4 the first time. There was 7 on board, but only half the crew is in this.
I think it was 4 and 3.
Okay, that sounds right.
We'll know in a second.
Yeah.
I will say, if you're ever the crew in the life raft, tie it off and have a plan, because it was a little chaotic as far as how we were closing it.
Yeah, and part of that, we had no real way to talk to them in the life raft until they got really close.
And it was a concept that they can also learn to us.
I'm gonna go with they weren't thinking real clearly about forces because we have winches and stuff. We could have brought them in, but we couldn't do any of that with them doing this because we knew that wasn't going to work. So that was where we started the process of backing down.
I never noticed how hot their fuel lines.
Oh yeah, I did. I was waiting for the life raft to rip in half.
This line here is going off to the canister. It's in the water. That was a major concern of us, getting it caught in our propeller. Josh was intimately watching that line.
When you launch a life raft, there ends up a lot of debris in the water just in the launch, which we had never known or thought about until we bore witness. One of the things you're really going to want to think about in terms of when you're rescuing somebody else is how are you going to get control of this bobbing thing? We came to a solution eventually, which I don't know if we see that here or not.
Next one.
We just muscled him out on this one.
Yeah.
So that's Joshua yanking everybody aboard.
wonderful swim ladder coming off the back of the boat, but there's a lot of stuff on the stern. It's not easy getting up over the transom once you get up the ladder.
Keep in mind, it's daylight. These are pretty moderate seas. Really, we couldn't have asked for better conditions. Doing this in the middle of the night in the Gulf Stream would have been a whole nother program. And I'm not sure how it would have looked. These guys were pretty tired. They were able to get their feet. They were able to stand up on the ladder. But you can really see Josh really boosts him aboard once he can get his paws on.
Why does it look like they're going right through the rail? Like, are they going over it or under it or what?
No, they're going over it. You can't go under it. We have so many, the antennas, all the stuff, the man overboard, the amount of man overboard gear you're required to carry with life rings and moms and all the other stuff. That rail is packed when we're headed offshore.
Now we got one guy left in there?
Yep. So the problem is he can't get out of the life raft because we're tied to it. So he's going to spend the next 5 minutes or so trying to untie the life raft. And actually there he was going to hand us a water jug and told him, we've got plenty of water.
Why don't they just go back and get the other people?
So we didn't think this was a good idea when it was happening. It certainly played out as not being a good idea. All the crew should have gotten in the life raft and cut away from the Gunga Din. That would have completely changed the situation for the better.
Yeah, this would be over already if all the crew were in the life raft and the life raft was not still attached. Because we're maneuvering, I'm working really hard right now to just keep from ripping that life raft in half between the two boats.
And what was the reason you didn't want to tie up the boat? Because they would sink and then you would too, or something else?
As the boats rock, your rigs are going to tangle.
Uh-huh.
Then you're all in trouble. So you can't get two sailboats side by side. That's a really good way to get into a lot of trouble.
Just look at the forces of us coming up against this rubber raft. Now imagine if that was another 20,000-pound boat. And if you look at glimpses of Gunga Din, you can see how much it's rocking back and forth. I mean, one way it doesn't look very rough out there, but
Yeah. But I know when we raft up with another boat, we just make sure that rigs are not aligned.
Yeah, when we're rafted, it's just you're not seeing 15. Gunga Din's probably rolling 10 to 15 degrees there. So it's just it's your amount of roll. You're not going to things were that bad in the harbor, you wouldn't raft. You wouldn't do it.
and in a harbor, if you rub gel coat,
Yeah.
it's unfortunate. In this case, somebody gets a broken arm, and you're still a day and a half away from rescue.
Mm.
That's not a risk we were willing to take.
Yeah, it's the sea state's probably 5, 6, 7 feet, somewhere in there. They're long, they're smooth, so in the grand scheme of waves, they aren't bad. But you're still looking at 5 foot. You're still looking at, you can see the changes in the life raft. You're still looking at pretty significant changes. Here, we finally get it loose.
We still don't have Alex.
No, he's still in the life raft.
Can we fast forward?
And it won't be much longer.
For what it's worth, this is real time. I mean, this is what it took. This is what we were doing.
Genius to take this video.
Did you have a camera fixed mounted that you put
Yes.
up just for this?
No, it's there the entire race. We just chose to turn it on. We discussed it like beforehand, like, should we be recording this? Is this a good idea to record or not a good idea? And we opted obviously to record it.
Because my thoughts were the SD card could always fall overboard.
And what he's dealing with, he's just dealing with a rat's nest of line all wrapped up inside the life raft, and he's trying to undo it under these varying loads and not lose a finger. And we didn't want them to cut it, because we needed the line again to rescue them again, because we're gonna do this twice.
Yeah, we need, going back offshore, a second throw bag probably wouldn't be terrible, because that was one of the things is, cut it. No, don't cut it. It's our only throw bag. Now, a throw bag isn't your only resource or your only tool, but it's a very useful tool, particularly for what we're doing right here.
Was there any thought about him jumping in the water and just rescuing him from the water?
Well, we need to get rid of the life raft, because we still got 3 more people to rescue.
Cool.
No, we had 4 on this job. There's 3 left.
But we have 3. So there's still 3 people sitting on Gunga Din waiting for a life raft. And
But the pipe, but the Gunga Din is tied to the life raft.
Correct.
we can't cut the throw line.
You need to throw.
We need the throw bag line. So, and to be clear, there's no hurt. There's literally no urgency where we're at right now. I mean, if there was an urgency, cut the line. We have lots of lines on the boat we can use for stuff.
And there's no station.
People in there.
So this is the second
Oh, is it second crew?
group.
So this is round 2.
So now, because they cut away, they had their painter line, they were able to throw them to us. And we had our throw bag, we could throw to them. Now we had 2 lines on.
And this made all the difference.
And where's Gunga Din? We don't know.
They're in the distance now, but we're drifting apart from each other.
We're now moving away. We're now moving downwind.
You'll catch glimpses of them from time to time,
Did they sink finally?
eventually.
So now this is what we view as a better way to approach it. We're able to take one of each of those. They can go back to winches, to our Jenna winches, and now we're able to control this on a bridle instead of something that's wagging around out there. And we end up with a much, much, much more controlled life raft. And
Now, ideally, this line should have gotten tied off to the life raft. That was never really communicated at the time.
Who was the source of them taking the water?
The mast step had failed, and the mast was pushing its way out the bottom of the boat. And that's why all the rigging was slack. They had the backstay at maximum, and both the backstay and the headstay were laying soft, because the mast was being pushed out the bottom. And you'll see how quickly everybody gets aboard this one. It's much easier.
Younger members of the crew.
True.
It's always nice to have that many people around the helm when you're trying to maneuver the boat.
well, I'm pretty used to having Josh in close proximity.
Like a puppy.
So that was our BBC announcer that just came aboard.
Introducing himself.
So what's funny about Jeff, who just came aboard, he's in the Navy. He comes aboard, he's like, "You the skipper? You the skipper?" He can't figure out who's in charge, who's running. Like, we're just working as a team, and he was pretty impressed the way we were operating the situation.
Here we're getting ready to deep six the life raft. In all this process, we did end up with a line wrapped around the prop. did not, it didn't wrap on anything that we didn't realize it. It was just there.
We didn't realize it till we were almost to Bermuda.
Yeah, it was daylight. Isabella wouldn't go swimming, so I had to. My swimmer took the day off.
You know, I have a picture of you eating a cookie soaking wet. After you removed the pages that I've not shared with them yet.
Uh-huh.
Wow, that went fast. Did you get to keep your swim liner, or did it tear off?
Oh no, swim. That's how it just trails because it's hinged.
Uh-huh.
So underway it'll trail. It's not really. The other thing is it wasn't meant for swimming on, so we've got some washcloths wrapped on there so it didn't destroy the transom because we had no intention of using the swim ladder on this trip.
Gunga is right up here.
Ah, okay.
And you can actually see the, make up the big arc in the headstay.
What kind of boat was Gunga in?
The Sweet 41.
Custom boat.
And was it old?
It wasn't terribly old. It had been modified. I think it had had a grounding in Newport, and then they did some keel modification to make it faster.
How were they once they got aboard?
How were they?
Yes, I mean, did they
Uh,
thank you, or did they start giving orders?
That would have been bad. That would have been received poorly. No, they came aboard very quietly and very docile.
The other
So.
thing was, while they were coming aboard, Sam was also catapulting them, like in the sense of like, see through.
When they came on, they went to the front of the boat and they were like out of our way so that we could take everybody else. And my daughter and I went up front and started taking names, making sure nobody had medical conditions, making sure nobody got hurt, nobody was hurt in the process.
So we had the benefit of prior pre-hospital, and medical on board. So that was immediately, as we were in this process, we set that up from go, was everybody comes aboard and goes forward. So that was Brian was kind of managing the cockpit area. Joshua and Ed were hauling them on. And then basically they got them on, go, on, go, on, go. And so they all got piled up and we went to work. What Samantha just explained, took their names. We got them entered into our logbook, put them in the ship's log that we'd taken all these people aboard. Keep in mind, we're all offshore in international waters. We're all going to have to go do something with customs. We don't know what that looks like now. What happens when you pick up 7 people you didn't have when you left?
Did they have their important paperwork, like passports and all that, or not?
They did. They had a ditch bag. They had some medical stuff. One of their crew was a physician, so he had his little medical bag, and they all had their passports. What they didn't have is appropriate clothing. About half of them came aboard in foul weather gear, and the other half came aboard in shorts and t-shirts. We still had 24-ish hours to get to Bermuda, and not a lot of cabin space. It was going to be a long, cold night on deck.
So we only have 4 sea bunks. So for the 7 of us, we have 4 places to sleep. Now we have 14 with 4 places to sleep.
So at this point, we're pointing the boat back towards Bermuda. We're under power. We're not sure what the weight of 7 additional people does to our stability. We don't know, is that a problem? Is that anything we need to think about? Brian does some quick math and determines that whatever, we're going to sail because we don't have enough gas to get to Bermuda. We have to sail. We don't have a choice.
So because we're racing, we spent a lot of effort before the race figuring out how much fuel and water are going to be on board because we don't want to take an extra pound if possible. So the race rules dictate that you have enough to charge your batteries as needed, arrive at Bermuda, and have enough fuel to steam an additional 100 miles. So we've been charging our batteries for the last 4 or 5 days. We just steamed for 3 hours. That wasn't planned at best possible speed. We spent another hour on scene motoring around. We've then motored for probably another half hour, 45 minutes towards Bermuda. We've we just burned a lot of fuel that we had not planned on burning. And if we were gonna make it under engine, it was gonna be really tight. And we decided we didn't, and we still had to get into the harbor once we got there, so.
Once you arrive in Bermuda, once you get in the neighborhood of Bermuda, there's a lot of stuff to hit. You need to make sure you want to be in a position to maneuver, and particularly getting down into Hamilton Harbor, as you start getting down into there, it gets tight. You could do it under sail if you really had to, but it wouldn't be optimal, and we determined that that was not the path. So we figured if we were going to sail, we might as well race. We entered the race.
It essentially is a log entry. So we logged that we suspended racing, we logged that we re-entered the race, and then we let the race committee decide what they're going to do with us.
Ultimately, I elected to give one of our sea bunks up. So we had our crew down to 3 sea bunks. So you were basically spending the first hour of your off watch, you were going to have to sit on deck. Our crew did have all their gear, so they shouldn't be cold. But they were now losing an hour of their off. An hour of their, what should be their bunk time was going to be gone now.
And the problems on Gungadin had been going on for days. This was not just an instantaneous, boom, we've got a problem. They had been fighting this issue for days in the nasty weather that we had all gone through. And a lot of them hadn't slept at all. And so there was quite a bit of tiredness going around.
Yeah, they were in pretty rough shape. They were pretty cold.
And nobody had really eaten in 2 or 3 days either, because, both on both boats, because it's hard to be motivated to eat in those conditions.
So they started rotating through that berth, getting people below, getting warmed up. And from there, it was 24-ish hours. We re-entered at 12:51 and crossed the finish line at 13:10.
The following day.
After you reported to the race committee that you had the rescue, what did they say? Like, thanks? Did they say anything?
Which part of reported that we had them aboard?
Yeah.
So that was all done.
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I could pull the email logs up, but essentially we told them that we had taken the crew on board, everybody was well. This is the position we last saw the boat, and that we were on our way to Bermuda. And it was like, great, good luck, see you in Bermuda.
Which, not a lot else to say.
I guess not.
So 13:10:48, we crossed the finish line, and our second Bermuda attempt's over. Things we took away from this. Be prepared to be a rescuer. And in our case, even more so if you're the slow boat. Most of these distance races tend to be reachy, downwindy races, which means the slower boats are going to end up coming into the problems. So you want to be prepared for that. There's a lot of discussion. If anyone's following the Newport Bermuda forums, a lot of this came out of what we had to say about it. If the Coast Guard shows up to rescue you, who's in charge? Say it louder.
Coast Guard.
That's right. There's no question asked. And this is one of the discussions we had, when we started with the various committees that were investigating all of this. They said, we said one of our takeaways was in the future, if we're rescuing someone, we're going to tell them point blank, we're here, we're willing to rescue you, but we're in charge. Otherwise, we're out. And the reason is we now are going to prepare a checklist, just like we have a flooding and abandoned ship, we'll prepare a rescuing checklist. So that'll be part of our process to know we're going to arrive on scene, we're going to give them certain direction. Things we're going to include in that, things we're going to add in our abandoned ship, because we looked at our abandoned ship and went, nope, we didn't have that in the checklist. We might have gotten off our boat without our gear too. It's a good idea. If they've been doing this, somebody's been in a situation where they're being rescued, there's a good chance they're pretty tired, they're pretty harried. Being able to hit them with just the little things. Hey, make sure you got your warm stuff. It's going to be a cold ride to Bermuda. If you need food, if you need water. At that point, we had the 3 hours to kind of take an inventory We had lots of food, lots of water. We knew that. That was not the case for the Alliance, the J122 that sunk. Their rescuers did not have a lot of food and water. They absolutely needed to bring food and water with them. So things like that in your own rescuer checklist that can say, hey, make sure you got this, make sure you got this, make sure you got this. Slow down, take a breath. If you have the time, use it. No, you're not doing a 2 life raft transfer. Everybody in the raft, cut it away. Be in a position to give that directive, to direct how you want the rescue to go. Because you're the ones who are going to be in the more rescued, better shape. Yes, Samantha?
I was just thinking back at something, because they were gonna do the same thing on Alliance. They were gonna split the crews to 2 different boats, and they couldn't.
Correct.
So I can't remember if they're teaching that at Safety at Sea or not, to split. I couldn't remember that conversation.
All right. It's a long, to make that comment as short as possible. Through some various conversations, one of the Gunga Din people is a supposed safety at sea expert.
He wrote part of the curriculum back in the 80s.
When I was going through all the stuff we had to go through at the yacht club after this, in relation to it, I ended up in the hall talking with, a lot of this is written up in theory. It's not always tested really well. What they were doing on Alliance is they had 9 on Alliance. They had a 9-person crew on Alliance on a 40-foot boat. They were going to a 38 or 40-foot boat that already had 8 or 7 on board, and were just like, it ain't gonna work.
And they had another 3 days to get to Bermuda, not 1 day like we had.
And they had another boat right there. So what they tried to do is they put the entire crew from Alliance in the life raft. They cut it away. The first boat came up to recover, pulled them up tight, similar to what we did, pulled them tight to the transom, started yanking them out of the raft. The goal was then to release the raft, have the other boat take the rest of the crew. That was the plan. I'm friendly with the skipper of Alliance, so we've talked about it. Unfortunately, while it was cinched up tight to Kaylee was the rescue boat, the swim ladder on Kaylee stabbed it and deflated one of the tubes in the life raft. So the decision was made, no, everybody's coming aboard. We're not releasing a damaged life raft. That's not happening. And that was the program, that was their plan. So splitting the crew up, it certainly in their case made sense, but they were doing it in a way that wasn't compromising the process, and if it didn't work, which it didn't, their end result was no different than if they didn't do that at all. What else would we, if once you're trying to board, you're trying to get out of a life raft onto a boat, assuming you're not in doubt about how that's gonna go, get that canopy out of the way. That thing is, trying to get in and out of working in that life raft with that canopy fully intact, not easy. Really gets in the way of everything.
So Adam, the life rafts themselves are rated for the amount, have to be rated for the amount of crew on board?
Correct. Yeah, you have to carry your life raft has to carry, you either have to have multiple life rafts, but your life raft has to be equal to or exceed the number of crew.
So they all have one?
So what?
So in both cases, they had one life raft?
Correct. Yep. What else do we want to say about that?
Can you describe your approach to the life raft? Did you come at it?
Upwind.
Upwind?
Yep. We sailed. Our goal was to not have a spinning propeller.
Right.
Our first approach was a total miss because we were under single reef. We had the main single reefed, and the breeze we had 20-ish, 15-ish,
15 to 20.
15 to 20 knots of breeze, even with just a single reef main. With the Genoa on the deck, we were still just going too fast. So we peeled off and put the second reef in.
Also, because the life raft was still attached to Gunga Din, the way a life raft sits, the door points towards the painter.
Okay.
So the door was facing Gunga Din. We didn't want to cross between the life raft and Gunga Din for obvious reasons. So that meant the door was facing away from us. So as we approached with way too much speed with just the main up, and tried making a throw bag to them against a door facing the wrong direction, it was not going to work. So we double reefed the main and had the canopy cut away, and The second attempt went much, much better.
Adam, you documented very clearly years worth of preparing
Mm-hmm.
and making sure everything on your boat was just so. Is it possible the other crew did not do that? Would there be any indication of why that mess got gateway?
I'm not in a position to comment on, I don't know what they've done or haven't done. Without going too far down that, if I was gonna make a broad statement, I would say based on a lot of the findings in this race, based on a lot of the damage in this race, people have gotten a little too comfortable with this being easy. And in general, I don't think the culture pushes towards the level of preparation. When we started this process, a number of people who had done this race half dozen times, a dozen times, said, why 5 years? I said, well, we've got to build this boat and build this crew. And they're like, 2 years. We disagreed. I disagree more now than then. I think 5 years was perfect for us. But everyone has to do their own process. What's up, Ed?
Just on, while we're on that topic, I would emphasize for anyone playing this or other races that crew is as, how you structure a training and practice with the crew is as important, maybe more than the boat. You need a well-found boat, but I saw a lot of things where together, to operate together, and Adam and Brian did excellent programming together for that.
Yeah, I think it's really common in these long races for people to put crews together out of various places, as opposed to a really structured crew that practices together all the time.
And one thing that was very unusual for us, or in our case, usually they require somebody to have done the race before. And this was a case where none of us had done the race. The only person that had crossed the Gulf Stream was Ed on a boat that wasn't his as crew. So we were going into this very green.
And that was part of our process for putting it together, is we needed to be there because we knew that we had a lot, there was still a lot we didn't know. All right, any other questions? Yes.
Going back to the life raft and having the 2 lines for control. So go through it again. I mean, they disembark into the life raft, have everybody in it.
Mm-hmm.
So how would you get in the 2 lines? Two bags, or how'd you?
In our-
gave them the second line when they were already at the boat, and if you got to redo it again to get 2 lines to them, would that be 2 throw bags right away? I mean, how would you do that?
The short answer is it could be 2 of anything. So we had some spinnaker sheets sitting on deck. We actually, I think we put some dock lines on deck when we were approaching, thinking we might need them and something shorter, something not as long might be useful. In the case of here, what we ended up doing is when they cut the boat, cut it away, they cut away right at the boat and they had almost the entire painter for the life raft. So they had a line in the life raft and then we had the throw bag. So ultimately we threw them the throw bag, they got that, and then they threw us their painter that they had, and that was our 2 lines.
Okay.
But in terms of producing 2 lines in a different event, any 2 lines will do. Something else that I would say should be on your checklist briefing is to brief. We're gonna pass you a line, tie it off, and keep your hands away from it. We'll pull you in, don't call us, we'll call you.
So in the first, getting the first group of people off, we had our throw bag, it was all tied in a big mess. We ended up passing them the tail of a jib sheet, and Alex wrapped it through one of the lines on the outside. He passed it back to us. We were able to take the load off our throw line. While he was untangling it, he was able to then come aboard, and now we have both ends of the line. We're able to untie the jib sheet and just let it out. That's how we ended up releasing it the first time.
I mean, ultimately, to be able to release it easily without having to cut anything, if you can take a line that's anchored to your vessel, pass it through and bring it back to you, now you've got control over things. Yes, sir?
I noticed in your preparation, you rebuilt the centerboard.
Mm-hmm.
wise thing to do. If I remember correctly, the Tartans, 37, had a lot of rudder problems. You had to rebuild the rudder on that boat.
2020, we put a brand new rudder on. So what's even more important than the rudder is the pintle bar.
Yeah.
So in 2020, we were up at Fort Rachel. We had the boat at Fort Rachel for the winter. They had done the job before. And so they actually, that's one of about 3 things that we contracted out. They actually changed the rudder, and then we did most of the final glass work for it. But on a Tartan 37, that pintle post, still sitting in my garage, it looks pretty tired. Doesn't look exactly like it would snap in half, but certainly those have.
Lots of crevice corrosion.
Yeah.
And you have to cut away fairing in order to get access to it, so you can't see it to inspect without doing destructive work. Yep.
Anybody else?
Our priority was to buy Desna, Dark and Stormies when they come.
We appreciate that. We'll always take Dark and Stormies.
Do you have any contact with any of the members that you rescued?
Oh, we have 7 new friends.
Oh, no kidding. Did you guys get along? Or?
We've maintained a relationship with a couple of them, yeah.
Yeah,
It's great.
a couple of them, most of them have gone back to their lives.
Where are they from? The UK and Newport, and one was from California.
I think too, it also adds a lot of value looking back on it, was actually being able to talk to them and hear from their point of view kind of what was going on, the lead up to the rescue. Once we took them on board, what was going through their head, I think that it gave us a different perspective, and we were able to look at the situation as a whole and really gather the lessons learned that you guys talked about. And just in general, it helped, like when they came up with, okay, now this is the checklist we're gonna have next time, kind of hearing what they went through. It was good to have both perspectives.
So did Gunga Din do a transatlantic to get to the start of the race?
They're from Newport.
No, it's a Newport boat.
Oh.
Their navigator and one of the crew members was from the UK.
I have a question, given I was there. If we had to do this the first time we did for